day for the most significant law to be passed since then, for the last 30 years.
And that's why gun owners wanted the Supreme Court to put the statute on hold. They have now said no.
Obviously gone, but it will be an inspiration for us to do more. I'm not going to sign this bill into law.
Strict limits on guns outside of a home. Two Supreme Court justices say the New York law presents some serious questions.
That is looking out and reading all the cases decided by the United States Court of Appeals and state Supreme Courts.
After the Rahimi case, this case might be the one that allows felons to have their gun rights back, or on the other hand, might be one that restricts them forever. Let's dive in. The Joshua Seekins case. The Joshua Seekins case might just be a landmark in the world of gun laws and the rights, or lack of rights, of felons to bear arms. The Supreme Court has recently declined to review a case known as Seeking v. U.S., which dealt with the question of whether the federal ban on felons possessing ammunition is constitutional under the Commerce Clause. The plaintiff in this case challenged the validity of Congress criminalizing the possession of ammunition that has crossed state lines and ended up in the possession of someone prohibited from having it under state law. While this case primarily focused on the Commerce Clause, the Supreme Court has chosen not to review the challenge. Interestingly, the court has not taken any action in a separate case called Rahimi, which suggests that they may be considering a broader examination of the issue surrounding felons possessing firearms or individuals being prohibited from firearm possession due to domestic violence restraining orders. The Commerce Clause, found in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 of the United States Constitution, grants Congress the power to regulate commerce among the states. It has been a significant source of authority for federal legislation in various domains, including firearms regulation. One area where the Commerce Clause intersects with gun control laws is in the prohibition of felons from possessing firearms. Under federal law, individuals who have been convicted of certain crimes, particularly felonies, are generally prohibited from possessing firearms. This restriction is intended to promote public safety and prevent those with criminal backgrounds from obtaining firearms. However, the constitutionality of such prohibitions and their relationship to the Commerce Clause have been subject to legal debate. The Commerce Clause allows Congress to regulate interstate commerce, which encompasses the movement of goods, services, and even intangible activities across state lines. When it comes to firearms, the federal government has relied on the Commerce Clause as a basis for enacting laws that regulate the possession, sale, and transfer of firearms. The rationale is that the movement of firearms in interstate commerce affects public safety and requires federal oversight. In the context of felons possessing guns, the Commerce Clause has been invoked to justify federal restrictions. The argument is that the possession of firearms by felons has an impact on interstate commerce, as firearms can be obtained from other states or cross state lines. Consequently, Congress has enacted laws making it a federal offense for individuals with felony convictions to possess firearms, regardless of whether the firearms were obtained in intrastate or interstate transactions. Challenges to the constitutionality of these laws have been brought forth on various grounds, including the argument that the Commerce Clause does not provide Congress with the authority to regulate purely local activities, such as the felon's possession of a firearm within a single state.
Yesterday, I spoke about the Supreme Court's shocking decision.
That is looking out and reading all the cases decided by the United States Court of Appeals and state Supreme Courts.
Strict limits on guns outside of a home. Two Supreme Court justices say the New York law presents some serious questions.
Some critics argue that the Commerce Clause was intended to regulate commercial activities and not individual conduct or criminal offenses. They contend that the possession of a firearm by a felon is a matter traditionally left to state law enforcement and should not fall within the purview of federal regulation. However, the Supreme Court has generally upheld federal restrictions on felons possessing guns under the Commerce Clause. In the landmark case United States v. Lopez, 1995, the court clarified that there are limits to Congress's authority under the Commerce Clause. The court held that for a federal law to be constitutionally valid, it must have a substantial connection to interstate commerce and not primarily regulate non-economic, intrastate activities. Since the Lopez decision, the Supreme Court has further refined its analysis of the Commerce Clause in subsequent cases. In United States v. Morrison, 2000, the court invalidated a provision of the Violence Against Women Act that allowed victims of gender-based violence to bring civil suits in federal court. The court reasoned that the link between gender-motivated violence and interstate commerce was too attenuated to justify federal regulation. Many people believe that felons should not be allowed to have firearms or ammunition due to concerns centered around public safety and the prevention of potential harm. The restriction on felons possessing firearms serves to protect society as a whole. Felons have been convicted of serious crimes which indicate a higher propensity for engaging in criminal behavior. By limiting their access to firearms, we can help prevent the misuse of these weapons and reduce the likelihood of further violence or criminal activity. Prohibiting felons from possessing firearms acts as a preventive measure to discourage recidivism. By creating an additional barrier to obtaining firearms, we can deter felons from participating in future criminal acts. This restriction sends a clear message that individuals with a history of criminal behavior should not have the means to escalate conflicts or engage in violent acts. Furthermore, restricting felons' access to firearms enhances public safety.
Implemented by states, my administration is going to focus on how they administer it and whether or not they violate other laws.
Saying you can bring a gun in here, you can't go into with a gun.
And that's why gun owners wanted the Supreme Court to put the statute on hold. They have now said no.
Restrictions that New York passed on their statute about where you can have guns, places that don't have a sign.
Firearms are inherently dangerous and potentially lethal weapons. By preventing felons from having access to firearms or ammunition, we minimize the risk of accidents, misuse, or unauthorized use. This proactive approach helps maintain a safer environment for individuals and communities, reducing the potential for gun-related incidents and associated harm. The prohibition on felons possessing firearms also upholds the integrity of the justice system. It is a consequence and condition that felons must abide by as part of their criminal sentence. By enforcing this restriction, we affirm that there are consequences and limitations on individuals who have been convicted of serious crimes. On the other hand, gun advocates do say that felons have spent their allotted time in prison and should now have access to the same rights as other people, as they have already paid the piece for their actions. Regardless, while the Commerce Clause remains a significant source of authority for federal firearms legislation, challenges to its application in the context of felons possessing guns continue to arise, and one of the cases that challenges it is this one, the Seekins case. The more you read about this case, the more absurd it starts sounding. The fact is that this man simply shouldn't have received such a heavy sentence for the alleged crime he committed. In 2019, Joshua Seekins was arrested in Texas on suspicion of stealing a U-Haul. At the time of his arrest, he was homeless and survived by searching through trash cans and dumpsters for items to store in the U-Haul. When the police encountered Seekins, they conducted a search of the U-Haul and discovered various items such as flashlights, old cell phones, lighters, a spyglass, and a 12-gauge shotgun shell in his possession. Initially, the police officers did not identify the shotgun shell as such. They believed it to be a flared launch shell, given the presence of a flare launcher in the U-Haul.
So the third party can either keep them in trust or sell them and give the money to Mr. Henderson.
James commented on the decision, saying she's pleased. Remember, the law as it stands strengthens requirements.
The flare gun, which Seekins had also found in a trash can, contained a shotgun shell. At the time, the police did not view this as a nefarious issue, and Seekins was primarily arrested due to the stolen U-Haul. During the review, the prosecutors initially charged Seekins with being a felon in possession of a firearm under 18 U.S.C. Section 922G. However, Seekins and his defense counsel notified the court that they intended to present an expert witness who would testify that the modified flare launcher did not meet the federal definition of a firearm. In response, the prosecutors changed their position and sought to charge Seekins with being a felon in possession of ammunition, also violating Section 922G. The original charges against Seekins did not consider the items as shotgun shells, and the prosecutors tried to include the felon in possession of a firearm charge, but realized that the flare launcher did not meet the definition of a firearm. Consequently, they changed their approach and focused on charging Seekins with being a felon in possession of the 2 shotgun shells he found in a dumpster. Ultimately, Seekins was charged and sentenced to 70 months in incarceration under Section 922GI, which prohibits felons from possessing firearms or ammunition that have been shipped or transported in interstate or foreign commerce. It is important to note that Seekins did not purchase these shotgun shells. He simply discovered them in a dumpster. Despite the fact that Seekins found the shotgun shells in a dumpster and did not acquire them through purchase, the Fifth Circuit, upon review, determined that his mere possession of these items warranted a 6-year prison sentence. The court based its decision on the understanding that Section 922G1, supported by congressional commerce power, makes it a federal crime for individuals previously convicted of a felony to possess firearms or ammunition that affect interstate commerce. In summary, Joshua Seekins' arrest and subsequent conviction revolved around his possession of 2 shotgun shells found in a dumpster. Although he did not purchase these items, their presence led to his prosecution and sentencing under federal law. Now, Seekins originally just petitioned for a rehearing en banc in the Fifth Circuit, but it was denied. In response to that denial of the rehearing en banc in the Fifth Circuit, Seekins then filed a petition of the Supreme Court seeking a search, and the review that he wanted was whether the law was applied to him is unconstitutional. Ultimately, the Supreme Court denied the petition again and ordered that the decision of the lower court will stand in this case. However, the Supreme Court did take a decision and is currently deliberating on another case regarding felons in possession of guns and ammo. That case was the Rahimi case. The Rahimi decision was significant because it was the first time that a federal appeals court held that the Second Amendment protects an individual's right to possess a firearm for self-defense, even if the individual is subject to a domestic violence restraining order. The decision is likely to have a significant impact on gun laws in the U.S. and especially on the Seekins case. But to truly understand its impact, we need to understand the Rahimi case in detail. The Rahimi case. United States v. Rahimi is a 2023 decision of the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, invalidating a federal law prohibiting individuals from possessing firearms while under a restraining order related to domestic violence. In 2022, the Supreme Court of the United States issued a ruling in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, Inc. v. Bruin, which changed the way courts assessed laws related to the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. Rather than examining the history of the Second Amendment and its scope, then applying intermediate scrutiny if the former is unclear, the test articulated by Justice Clarence Thomas requires gun-related legislation to be in line with the country's historical firearm legislation. According to that opinion, laws must have historical analogs to laws existing at the time of the Second Amendment's ratification in 1791 or incorporation in 1868 via the 14th Amendment. Zaki Rahimi was issued a civil restraining order by a Texas state court on February 5, 2020, after his ex-girlfriend accused him of attacking her. The order barred him from engaging in certain harassment-related behaviors towards his ex-girlfriend or her child, as well as owning firearms. Suspecting Rahimi of an unrelated crime, officers executed a search warrant at his home, discovering a rifle and a pistol he admitted to possessing. He was charged and convicted in a federal district court of unlawful firearm possession under U.S.C. Section 922G8, which prohibits individuals from owning firearms if they are subject to a court order that restrains them from harassing, stalking, or threatening an intimate partner. Rahimi appealed his conviction, bringing a facial challenge to U.S.C. Section 922G8 in the District Court for the Northern District of Texas on Second Amendment grounds. The court rejected his challenge, and Rahimi appealed to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. A panel for the Fifth Circuit initially upheld Section 922G8, but while Rahimi's petition for a rehearing was pending, the Supreme Court decided Bruin,
and in many cases, the value of the firearms can be quite high.
Day for the most significant law to be passed since then, since the last 30 years.
And prohibits guns in sensitive places and requires background checks on all ammunition purchases.
Statute means what it says. It says that a convicted felon cannot possess a firearm.
I'd like to thank the leaders and members of the House and Senate for working together to get this done. I especially want to thank the families.
It doesn't say he can't sell a firearm that the government is possessing on his behalf,
causing the panel to withdraw its opinion. The parties filed supplementary briefs and re-argued the case before a new panel of 3 judges, 2 appointed by President Donald Trump and the 3rd by President Ronald Reagan. On February 2, 2023, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals struck down USC Section 922G8 as unconstitutional, barring it from being enforced in Texas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. The Fifth Circuit withdrew the panel's opinion and filed a revised opinion on March 2, 2023, reaching the same result. On March 17, 2023, the United States Justice Department petitioned the Supreme Court to overturn the appeals court decision and allow the federal law criminalizing firearm ownership by people under domestic violence restraining orders to stand. In court papers filed, Solicitor General Elizabeth Prologar told the justices they should take up the Rahimi case next term and reverse the appeals court decision that threatens grave harms for victims of domestic violence. After the justices issued New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin a year ago, lower courts began to reconsider thousands of firearm rules across the country, including the federal law at issue in the case at hand. A panel of judges on the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals cited Bruin and held that the statute is an outlier that our ancestors would never have accepted. But what exactly was the Bruin case, and how does it impact this situation? The Bruin case. The Bruin case was a landmark Supreme Court case that struck down New York's concealed carry law. The law required gun owners to show proper cause to obtain a concealed carry permit, which meant that they had to demonstrate a specific need for self-defense. The background of the case goes right back to the Second Amendment in itself and people's growing need for safety and control. In an effort to address the rise in criminal violence in specific neighborhoods of New York City, which included notable incidents like the assassination attempt on Mayor William J. Gaynor and the slaying of author David Graham Phillips, Timothy Sullivan spearheaded the passage of the Sullivan Act in 1911 through the state legislature. This act criminalized the possession of handguns without a permit and introduced a system for issuing concealed carry permits, granting local law enforcement the authority to decide who could obtain them. According to the law, individuals seeking a permit had to demonstrate a distinct and legitimate need for self-protection that set them apart from the general community or others in the same profession. The state clarified that the need for self-defense must be based on specific circumstances and not mere speculation in order to establish a valid cause for granting a permit. Challenging this law, the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, along with Robert Nash and Brandon Koch, who were denied permits in New York State, sought to eliminate the discretionary nature of permit issuance. The Sullivan Act is widely recognized as the pioneering may-issue law for public carry in the U.S. This approach grants discretion to authorities in determining whether an individual can carry a firearm in public based on an evaluation of their demonstrated need. Several other states subsequently adopted this may-issue approach, taking inspiration from New York's legislation. In the end, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Nash and Koch in a 6-3 decision. The court held that the Second Amendment protects an individual's right to carry a gun for self-defense outside the home, and that this right is not limited to those who can show a special need. The court's decision in the Bruin case is a significant victory for gun rights advocates. It has made it easier for people to carry guns in public, and it has opened the door for more challenges to other gun control laws. The Bruin case is also significant because it is the first time that the Supreme Court has ruled on the right to concealed carry since 2008, when it decided the landmark case, District of Columbia versus Heller. In Heller, the court held that the Second Amendment protects an individual's right to keep and bear arms in the home for self-defense. The Bruin case expands on Heller by holding that the Second Amendment also protects an individual's right to carry a gun outside the home for self-defense.
Today, we say more than enough. We say more than enough.
No Democrat has ever tried to get anybody's guns. I mean, that's just a lie that they tell, and y'all ought to stop perpetuating their lie.
We can reach compromise on guns. We ought to be able to reach compromise on other critical issues, from veterans' health care.
It was also the first gun rights case to be heard by the 6-member conservative majority, which included Justices Clarence Thomas, Neil Gorsuch, and Brett Kavanaugh, who in prior opinions had emphasized the need for the Supreme Court to review the current stance on Second Amendment cases. Justice Amy Coney Barrett had also expressed support for a Second Amendment review prior to her appointment to the Supreme Court. Because of the shift toward a more conservative membership, some court analysts believe that the court might interpret the Second Amendment more liberally in favor of individual rights over states' powers, which could render many existing public possession regulations unconstitutional. The Bruen decision is likely to have a significant impact on gun laws in the United States. In the wake of the decision, several states have repealed or weakened their concealed carry laws. Gun rights advocates have also challenged other gun laws in court, citing the Bruen decision. It is still too early to say what the long-term impact of the Bruen decision will be. However, it is clear that the decision has made it easier for people to carry guns in public. This, in turn, whether directly or indirectly, had an impact on the Joshua Seekins and Rahimi case. While the ruling directly applied only to New York's law, legal analysts and lawmakers expected the ruling to be used to challenge the may-issue gun regulations in California, Hawaii, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and Rhode Island. Lawmakers in New York and these states began evaluating new regulations that would comply with the Supreme Court ruling while maintaining strict ownership laws. On June 24, 2022, the acting Attorney General of New Jersey, Matthew J. Platkin, concluded that Bruen disallowed the state from requiring concealed carry permit applicants to demonstrate a justifiable need to carry a handgun, and directed law enforcement and prosecutors to process applications on a shall-issue basis. The governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, called the decision by the court frightening and said it strips away the state's right to protect its citizens. She also criticized the decision as reckless and reprehensible.
So other families will not have the experience and the pain and trauma that they had to live through.
To have their firearms, which are being held by the government, transferred to a third party for the third party to sell.
Atlanta, Buffalo, Uvalde, and for the shootings that happen every day in the street that are mass shootings we don't even hear about.
By July 1, 2022, Hochul signed a revised Concealed Carry Improvement Act into law with restrictions on public possession of guns based on the decision from Bruen. The new law removes the old may-issue standard that had been challenged, but adds new requirements, including classroom training and a background check of the applicant's social media posts for any red flags. In addition, the law prohibits guns from being carried in sensitive locations that include polling places, schools, and churches, as well as New York's tourist attractions like Times Square. The law came into effect on September 1, 2022. An initial lawsuit seeking to block enforcement of the law was thrown out due to lack of standing, though federal judge Glenn Sotheby did agree the new law may be unconstitutional under the Bruen decision. A second lawsuit, filed by citizens that belong to Gun Owners of America, led to Judge Sotheby to grant an injunction on the law on October 6, 2022, stating that the law's full list of locations where public carry was banned was likely indefensible, though the state filed an emergency appeal to the Second Circuit. The Second Circuit lifted the injunction, allowing the law to be enforced, while they reviewed their case. Changing gun rights landscape. The gun rights landscape in the U.S. has been changing rapidly in recent years. These few cases are not the only cases that have changed the U.S., especially considering that the Biden administration has been at the forefront of these changes. President Biden had made gun control a top priority, and he has taken a number of steps to restrict access to firearms. One of the most significant changes that Biden has made is to reinstate the federal attack weapons ban. This ban, which was in effect from 1994 to 2004, prohibited the manufacture, sale, and transfer of certain types of semi-auto firearms. Biden believes that these weapons are too dangerous to be in the hands of civilians, and he has argued that reinstating the ban would save lives. In addition to reinstating the weapons ban, Biden has also taken steps to expand background checks for gun purchases. He has proposed requiring background checks for all gun sales, including sales at gun shows and online. He has also proposed closing the boyfriend loophole, which currently allows people who have been convicted of domestic violence to purchase guns if they are not married to their victim, which also relates to the Rahimi case.
Obviously they're gone, but will be an inspiration for us to do more. I'm not going to sign this bill into law.
I don't have a gun, but I don't give a damn about anybody else having one.
Biden has also taken steps to address the issue of ghost guns. Ghost guns are firearms that are assembled from kits and do not have serial numbers. This makes them difficult to trace, and they have been used in a number of high-profile shootings. Biden has proposed requiring serial numbers for all ghost guns and making it illegal to manufacture or sell them without a license. The Biden administration's gun control efforts have been met with mixed reactions. Gun rights advocates have argued that the administration is violating the Second Amendment right to bear arms. They have also argued that the proposed changes will not be effective in reducing gun violence. On the other hand, supporters of gun control argue that the changes are necessary to protect public safety. They point to the fact that the U.S. has a far higher rate of gun violence than other developed countries. They argue that the proposed changes would make it more difficult for dangerous people to obtain guns, and they would save lives. The debate over gun control is likely to continue for many years to come. The Biden administration's efforts to restrict access to firearms are a significant change in the gun rights landscape, and it remains to be seen whether they will be successful in reducing gun violence. So with all these new laws surrounding firearm rights, we have yet to see how the Seekins case will be dealt with, or whether he will simply have to spend 6 years in jail for his mistake. That's all for today, folks. See you next time.